In every season of life, there comes a moment when the weight of challenges feels heavy and the road ahead seems blocked. But prayer is the key that unlocks closed doors and brings divine intervention at the right time. Billy Graham once reminded the world that prayer is not just words spoken into the air, but a direct connection to the power of God. When you choose to say a prayer before midnight, you align your spirit with heaven, and within 24 hours unseen doors can begin to open. This is not about superstition, but about faith, trust, and surrender to the one who controls time, destiny, and breakthroughs. Prayer has always been one of the greatest mysteries of life, because it connects the visible with the invisible, the limited with the unlimited, the human with the divine. When a person kneels in prayer, time seems to stand still, but in reality, prayer is what activates time. Prayer is what aligns our earthly schedules with the heavenly calendar. We live in a world where timing means everything. Opportunities are lost when we are too late. Blessings feel wasted when they come too early. But when things happen in their perfect timing, we see miracles unfold before our eyes. The power of prayer activates that kind of timing because prayer invites God into the rhythm of our lives and allows Him to orchestrate events in ways we could never imagine on our own. Many people struggle because they try to control time by their own efforts, rushing into things, delaying things, missing moments because they believe they know best. But prayer humbles the human spirit and says, God, I trust your time over mine. That is why when Billy Graham often spoke about prayer, he emphasized that it is not simply asking for things, but positioning yourself under God's authority so that His timing, not yours, becomes the unfolding plan of your life. Think about how many times in your life you wanted something desperately, but it seemed delayed. You may have prayed, cried, worked, and yet the door remained closed. It is easy to believe that prayer did not work, but sometimes the answer was already set in motion, only awaiting the appointed time. Just as a farmer does not expect seeds to sprout the moment they touch the soil, prayer is the planting of faith into God's timing. The farmer trusts the rain, the sunlight, and the seasons, knowing that harvest is certain if patience is maintained. In the same way, prayer activates divine timing because it puts the harvest on heaven's schedule, not on our impatient demands. Divine timing is never late and never early. It is always on schedule, and prayer is the reminder that what God has prepared cannot be rushed and cannot be stopped. People may rise against you, challenges may surround you, and doors may seem locked, but when the appointed hour comes, no one can hold back what God has ordained. Throughout history, countless testimonies have proven this truth. A young student struggling for success prays for wisdom and suddenly meets the right mentor at the right time. A person waiting for healing prays earnestly, and though the illness lingers, the recovery comes at a moment that changes not only their body, but their entire faith. A family in financial hardship prays before midnight, and within 24 hours a door of provision opens, not randomly, but in the precise moment when it impacts their lives the most. Prayer does not manipulate God, it activates divine alignment. There is a difference between human timing and divine timing, and prayer is what bridges the two. When you pray, you are not only speaking words into the air, you are making a declaration that your life is not run by chance, but by a higher hand that arranges all things perfectly. The beauty of prayer is that it takes ordinary people and places them into extraordinary schedules. You may wake up tomorrow and think it is just another day, but if you prayed in faith the night before, tomorrow may carry the moment of your breakthrough. That job interview you thought was delayed might be perfectly aligned with someone's resignation that creates space for you. That business deal you thought was failing may be waiting for the market conditions that only God could orchestrate. That relationship you thought was slipping away may only be delayed until you both are prepared to handle it with maturity. Divine timing is always activated by prayer because prayer is surrender to a wisdom that is greater than your own. Too often we waste time worrying, complaining, and doubting, when prayer could move us into peace and confidence that the right time is on its way. Worry makes you feel like time is against you. Prayer reminds you that time is working for you, because the one who made time is in control. The midnight hour carries deep symbolism in many traditions. It is the transition between the end of one day and the beginning of another, the moment when darkness reaches its deepest point, but also the hour closest to the dawn. Praying before midnight is a statement of faith that says, even in the darkest hour, I believe God is arranging my tomorrow. When you pray at midnight, you are placing the schedule of your life into divine hands, trusting that within the next 24 hours, something will move, shift, or open because prayer has activated the schedule of heavens. The Bible itself is filled with stories where divine timing turned situations around. Paul and Silas prayed and sang hymns at midnight, and their prison doors opened. Esther prayed and fasted before approaching the king, and at the perfect moment, the favor she needed was granted. Hannah prayed for a child, and though it seemed delayed, Samuel was born at the exact time God ordained for Israel's history. None of these stories happened by chance. They happened because prayer activated divine timings. There is also a profound patience that comes with understanding the power of prayer. Impatience often causes people to give up just before the moment of breakthrough. Many abandon their prayers because they assume silence means denial, but silence is often the waiting room of divine timing. Just as a theater curtain stays closed while the stage is being prepared, prayer is what keeps you positioned until the curtain rises. God's silence is not God's absence. It is often His preparation. The person who prays learns to wait without fear because they know divine timing cannot fail. Waiting on God's timing does not mean doing nothing. It means preparing your heart, your character, and your faith so that when the door opens, you are ready to walk through it. Prayer shapes you while you wait and prepares the blessing while you prepare yourself. Another aspect of divine timing is that it often brings acceleration. What you thought would take years can happen in a day when prayer activates God's schedule. Joseph spent years in prison, but in one single day he was called to interpret Pharaoh's dream and was promoted to the highest position. That sudden shift was not random. It was divine timing activated by God's plan and Joseph's faith. You may feel like you are stuck in a season of delay, but when prayer aligns you with heaven's calendar, what seems slow can suddenly accelerate. The right phone call, the right opportunity, the right meeting can happen faster than you ever imagined. This is why prayer is powerful. It does not just comfort you during waiting, it positions you for acceleration at the appointed time. Every person who prays must also learn the humility of recognizing that divine timing is not about personal control. Prayer is not demanding that God fits into your clocks. It is trusting that His clock is perfect. We often think we are ready when we are not. We often think we are prepared when we are still untested. Divine timing ensures that blessings do not become burdens. A door that opens too soon can destroy you. A door that opens at the right time can elevate you. Prayer is what ensures the right time arrives with the right conditions. When you pray, you are not only asking for the blessing, but also asking for the readiness to receive it. That is why prayer and divine timing cannot be separated. They are intertwined because prayer shapes your soul while divine timing shapes your circumstances. Imagine standing in front of a locked door. Without prayer, frustration takes over. You might push, kick, or even walk away in defeat. But when you pray, you realize that the key is not in your pocket, but in heaven's hand, and at the right time, the door will open. You stop exhausting yourself on locked doors, and instead focus on trusting God to open them at the right moment. That is why people who live prayerful lives are often more peaceful, more patient, and more resilient. They understand that every season has its purpose, and every delay has its meaning. Prayer keeps their hope alive even when the clock seems to be ticking against them. The power of prayer activating divine timing also means that no obstacle can cancel what God has scheduled. The enemy may try to delay, distract, or discourage, but when God says the time has come, nothing can stop it. Prayer builds your faith to believe that no matter how many setbacks you have faced, the setup for your comeback is already scheduled. What looks like wasted years can be redeemed in a single moment when God steps in. That is why midnight prayer is so significant. It is a declaration of trust, a commitment to believe that tomorrow carries an answer, and within 24 hours, something must shift because prayer has invited divine timing into your situation. There are unseen battles happening all around us, Battles that cannot be fought with human hands or solved with human intellect. These are spiritual battles, the conflicts between light and darkness, hope and despair, peace and chaos. Every day we face the weight of them even when we cannot see them. The confusion in the mind, the heaviness in the heart, the obstacles that rise without explanation. These are often not just natural problems but manifestations of spiritual warfare. This is why prayer is not just a habit, it is a weapon. And midnight prayer carries a special power because it addresses the battle when it is at its strongest. The midnight hour is symbolic. It represents transition, the changing of times, the deepest darkness just before the dawn. Many spiritual forces operate in darkness, and midnight prayer is a declaration that no matter how dark it is, the light of God is still greater. When you lift your voice in prayer at midnight, you are not simply whispering words into silence. You are engaging in warfare. You are claiming victory when the enemy thinks he has the advantage. You are speaking faith in the hour most people are asleep, and that faith shifts the battle in your favor. When Billy Graham spoke about the power of prayer, he often emphasized that it is not about the eloquence of the words, but the sincerity of the heart and the faith behind it. Midnight prayer magnifies this truth because it is sacrifice. It is choosing to rise when the body wants rest. It is declaring that spiritual matters are more urgent than sleep. It is giving the first hours of a new day to God and saying, I trust you to fight my battles. That sacrifice itself carries power. It shakes the atmosphere because sacrifice always draws divine attention. When you pray at midnight, you are stepping into a sacred place where you meet God at a time many ignore. This unique hour is where chains can break, confusion can lift, attacks can be stopped, and victories can be won. Midnight prayer is not about superstition. It is about intentional alignment with the Spirit when darkness is at its peak, and choosing to shine the light of faith. Think of how battles are fought in the physical world. Victory is often determined not just by strength but by timing, positioning, and strategy. In the same way, midnight prayer positions you strategically in the spiritual realm. It places you on the battlefield when the enemy thinks you are weakest. Most attacks come in the night, dreams disturbed, mind attacked, fear amplified, yet it is in this hour that prayer becomes the shield and the sword. When you wake up and declare God's promises at midnight, you are saying that fear will not have the last word, worry will not dictate the night, despair will not win, because prayer is pushing back the darkness. Midnight prayer is the counterattack. It is the refusal to surrender. It is the boldness to stand in the middle of the night and believe that the morning will bring breakthrough. Throughout Scripture, midnight is not just a time, it is a turning point. Paul and Silas sang hymns and prayed at midnight in the prison, and their chains fell off. That was not a coincidence, it was a spiritual battle won through prayer. At midnight, the Israelites were delivered from Egypt as the angel of death passed over. Midnight became the time of transition from bondage to freedom. These are not mere stories. They are reminders that battles fought at midnight are decisive. When you pray at midnight, you are connecting yourself to a legacy of believers who understood that the darkest hours are often the most fertile ground for miracles. Spiritual battles do not end because you ignore them. They end because you confront them with the power of prayer, and midnight prayer is confrontation at its boldest. One of the reasons midnight prayer shifts spiritual battles is because it breaks the cycle of fear. The enemy thrives on fear, whispering lies into the mind, magnifying problems in the silence of the night. How many people lie awake at night consumed by anxiety, worried about the future, overwhelmed by what they cannot control? Fear multiplies in darkness, but prayer transforms fear into faith. When you rise at midnight and pray, you are replacing anxious thoughts with divine promises. You are reminding yourself and declaring to the spiritual realm that God has not given you a spirit of fear but of power, love, and a sound mind. That shift in your own spirit changes the battle. The enemy cannot thrive in the presence of faith. Midnight prayer is not just about words, it is about changing the atmosphere around you and within you. It takes the silence of the night, where fear tries to dominate, and fills it with declarations of victory. Midnight prayer also brings clarity. Many times confusion is a weapon of the enemy. When your mind is clouded, You make poor choices, you lose hope, you question your worth. But prayer clears the fog. In the stillness of the night, when distractions are few, prayer opens your ears to hear God's voice more clearly. You may pray at midnight for answers, and though the world is asleep, revelation comes alive. Ideas, wisdom, direction, comfort, and courage flow when you are quiet before God in prayer. This clarity is a weapon in spiritual battles because clarity prevents deception. The enemy thrives on lies, but when prayer reveals truth, deception loses its power. Many breakthroughs come not only through external victories, but through internal clarity, knowing who you are, knowing what to do, and knowing that you are not alone. Midnight prayer creates space for this clarity to emerge and strengthen you for the battle. There is also authority that comes with midnight prayer. Jesus himself often prayed in the night, withdrawing to quiet places to commune with his Father. He understood the authority that comes from prayer and solitude. Authority is not about shouting louder or demanding things from God. It is about alignment. When you pray at midnight, your spirit aligns with the Spirit of God, and authority flows from that alignment. Suddenly you find yourself speaking not from fear but from faith, declaring not from weakness but from strength. Authority shifts the battle because it reminds the enemy that you are not fighting alone. You are backed by heaven. Midnight prayer gives you the authority to stand firm, resist temptation, break chains, and declare victory over situations that seemed impossible. Authority changes battles, and prayer is where authority is renewed. Another reason midnight prayer is powerful in shifting battles is that it breaks patterns and cycles. Many people find themselves trapped in repetitive struggles, addictions, failures, disappointments, as if their lives move in circles. These cycles are not always just natural habits. Often they are spiritual strongholds. Midnight prayer disrupts these cycles because it introduces divine intervention at the point of repetition. When you pray consistently at midnight, you are breaking patterns of defeat and creating patterns of victory. You are teaching your spirit that the night no longer belongs to the enemy, it belongs to God. That act itself shifts battles because it removes the foothold of the enemy and establishes new ground for faith to grow. Prayer plants seeds in the spirit, and midnight prayer plants them in the soil of the darkest hours, ensuring that even darkness produces fruit for God's glory. Midnight prayer also unites with persistence. Spiritual battles are rarely won with a single act. They require persistence, consistency, endurance. Praying once is powerful, but praying persistently at midnight builds momentum. Each night of prayer is another strike against the forces that resist you, another layer of faith built within you. Persistence in prayer is a sign that you refuse to quit until victory is manifested. Jesus told the parable of the persistent widow who kept appealing to the judge until she received justice. Midnight prayer embodies that persistence. Each time you rise and pray at midnight, you are making a declaration that you will not stop until the breakthrough comes. That persistence shifts battles because the enemy cannot withstand unrelenting faith. Finally, midnight prayer brings peace. After the battle, after the declarations, after the warfare, prayer leaves you with peace. Peace is not the absence of battle, it is the presence of assurance. Midnight prayer strengthens you to face the battles of the next day with courage, because you know you are not fighting alone. That peace is part of the victory itself. Battles shift not only when circumstances change, but when your heart changes. Midnight prayer ensures that even before you see the outcome, you carry peace that surpasses understanding. That peace is what keeps you steady when storms rise. That peace is what sustains you while waiting for breakthrough. That peace is the evidence that midnight prayer has already shifted the battle in your favor, because the greatest victory is not external change, but internal strength. When you look at the story of humanity, the greatest breakthroughs never came through pride or self-sufficiency, they came through surrender. A surrendered heart is one that says, I cannot do this by myself, I cannot carry this burden alone, I cannot make doors open on my own strength, but I trust the one who can. Faith without surrender is incomplete because faith is not only believing God can do something, it is letting go of your need to control how and when He will do it. God does not respond to arrogance, to prideful demands, or to hearts that treat Him like a vending machine. God responds to a heart surrendered in faith, a heart that bows low in humility, acknowledging His power and His wisdom above our own. That is when miracles happen, because the soil of surrender is the richest ground for divine intervention. A surrendered heart is not weak. It is powerful because it has shifted the battle from human limitation to divine possibility. Many people pray but never truly surrender. They bring their requests to God but still hold tightly to fear, to doubt, to worry, to control. They pray but then they try to force outcomes, manipulate situations, or panic when nothing changes immediately. Surrendered faith is different. It says, I release this into your hands, and I will not take it back. That act of letting go is the true evidence of trust. God moves when you stop striving and start trusting. He responds when you give Him not only your words but your will. Faith is not just mental agreement, it is an act of the heart, and surrender is the highest form of faith. Throughout history and Scripture, God has honored surrendered hearts. Abraham was asked to surrender his son Isaac, the very promise he had waited years for. It was in that moment of surrender that God provided a ram in the thicket, proving that His provision is released when we let go of what we hold most tightly. Hannah surrendered her desire for a child, pouring out her soul in prayer, and her surrender opened the way for Samuel, one of the greatest prophets of Israel. Jesus Himself, in the Garden of Gethsemane, surrendered His will, saying, Not my will, but yours be done. That surrender led to the salvation of humanity. God always responds to surrender because surrender is the language of trust, the proof that you are willing to exchange your plan for His. Surrendered faith is often misunderstood as passive, but it is not. It is not sitting back and doing nothing. It is actively trusting God by aligning your actions with His promises. When you surrender, you still prepare, you still work, you still pray, but you no longer carry the anxiety of trying to control outcomes. You plant the seeds, but you trust God for the harvest. You knock on doors, but you leave it to Him which ones will open. You walk in obedience without demanding to see the full picture. That posture itself moves the hand of God because it shows Him that your dependence is genuine. God delights in faith, but He answers surrendered faith most powerfully because it is free of pride. The Bible says God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Humility and surrender are inseparable, and they are irresistible to God's heart. Surrendered faith also transforms the person who carries it. It softens the heart, quiets the mind, and releases peace. When you are surrendered, you no longer fight battles that are not yours to fight. You no longer exhaust yourself trying to fix what only God can fix. You no longer live restless nights worrying about things outside of your control. You find rest in surrender because you know the outcome is in safer hands than yours. That peace itself is evidence of faith. People who live in surrendered faith shine with a calmness others notice. They walk with assurance even when storms are raging. They face rejection without bitterness, delays without despair, obstacles without giving up. That inner posture not only draws God's response, but also inspires others to trust Him as well. God responds to surrender not only by opening doors, but by shaping the surrendered heart into a vessel of strength. One of the greatest tests of surrender is timing. Faith often says, I believe it will happen, but surrender says, I believe it will happen in God's time. Many people lose their faith not because God did not answer, but because He did not answer when they expected. A surrendered heart understands that delay is not denial, that waiting is not wasting, that silence is not absence. Surrender says, even if I wait longer than I want, I will still trust. That trust is precious to God because it proves love, it proves loyalty, it proves relationship. Anyone can believe when answers come quickly, but surrendered faith believes even in the waiting, even in the silence. That faith moves God because it mirrors the trust of a child and a father. Children do not question every detail. They rest in the security of knowing their parent cares. When you surrender like that, God honors your trust with blessings at the right time. Surrender is also powerful because it removes idols. Idols are not only statues, they are anything we place above God in our hearts. For some, it is money, for others, relationships, careers, dreams, or even personal plans. When you cling too tightly to something, it can become an idol, even if it is a good thing. God calls for surrender, not because He wants to take from you, but because He wants to give to you without competition in your heart. Surrender purifies your faith. It says, even if I lose everything, I will not lose my trust in you. That kind of faith is unshakable, and it opens doors because nothing stands between you and God. He responds to that purity by entrusting you with blessings that will not destroy you. Many doors remain closed because the heart is not surrendered, and if the door opened too soon, it would lead to pride, distraction, or destruction. But when surrender clears the heart of idols, God can safely open doors knowing you will honor Him with the blessing. Surrendered faith also releases supernatural strength. When you stop trying to carry everything yourself, God carries you. His strength is made perfect in weakness. That means the very moment you surrender your weakness is the very moment His strength flows through you. That strength opens doors because it empowers you to do what you could not do on your own. It gives you endurance in trials, courage in challenges, and boldness in the face of giants. The surrendered heart says, I cannot, but He can. And that confession invites the supernatural into the natural. God responds to surrender by filling the surrendered space with His power. What you lay down in surrender becomes the place He lifts up in victory. There is also a deep intimacy that comes through surrender. Prayer without surrender can become ritual, but prayer with surrender becomes relationship. You are no longer just bringing requests, you are opening your heart fully. You are saying, God, I trust you with my dreams, my fears, my desires, my failures. That vulnerability draws you closer to Him, and in that closeness you begin to hear His voice more clearly, feel His presence more deeply, and walk in His will more confidently. Intimacy itself is an answered prayer, because many times the door we need opened is not external but internal. We need the door of our heart open to God's love, peace, and guidance. Surrender creates that opening, and God always responds to it by pouring Himself into the surrendered vessel. Surrender also changes perspective. When you are surrendered, setbacks do not crush you, they teach you. Delays do not discourage you, they refine you. Pain does not destroy you, it deepens you. You begin to see everything through the lens of trust, and that perspective itself is victory. You stop asking, why me? And start asking, what is God doing in me? That shift makes you unshakable because your faith is no longer dependent on circumstances, but rooted in surrender. God responds to that kind of maturity by entrusting you with greater assignments, greater opportunities, greater doors. He knows that a surrendered heart will not waste what He gives. That is why many times the door you are praying for requires surrender first, because the blessing on the other side is bigger than you imagine, and only surrender can prepare you to handle it. Another beautiful truth is that surrendered faith leaves a legacy. When your children, friends, or community see you surrender in faith, they learn to do the same. They see the peace you carry, the strength you live with, the miracles that follow your surrender, and they are inspired. Your surrender becomes their encouragement. The doors God opens for you through surrender become pathways for those after you. Generational curses are broken by one surrendered heart, and generational blessings are released because of it. Surrender is never wasted, it multiplies its impact. God responds not only for your sake but for the sake of those connected to you. Your surrendered faith becomes a testimony that lives beyond you. Ultimately, the reason God responds to a surrendered heart is because surrender honors Him as God. It declares that He is sovereign, He is wise, He is trustworthy. It gives Him His rightful place in your life. And when He is honored, He releases His blessings. When you let go, He takes over. When you release, He fills. When you bow down, He lifts up. That is the rhythm of the surrendered life. And it is the secret of doors opening in ways you never imagined.